Tonight, we begin beside the soft, dark water of Nantucket, where the lamps are low, the sea is calm, and a young girl named Maria Mitchell is learning to read the stars. The island rests quietly in the ocean, wrapped in a blanket of cool evening air, while the gentle rhythm of the waves coaxes the world into a deep, peaceful sleep. In the distance, the harbor lanterns flicker with a warm and amber glow, casting long, soft shadows across the weathered wooden shingles of the old rooftops. The salty mist drifts slowly through the narrow lanes, carrying the scent of the sea and the quiet promise of a restful night. Everything here moves with a deliberate, unhurried grace, from the slow turning of the tides to the steady, comforting beam of the lighthouse on the shore. It is within this sanctuary of silence that we find a place to rest, leaving behind the busy thoughts of the day as we prepare to follow a journey that unfolded long ago beneath these very same skies. We are stepping back into the early days of the 19th century, to a time when the world was illuminated by candlelight and whale oil lamps, and the night sky was vast, dark, and wonderfully clear. In the year 1818, a little girl was born into this peaceful landscape, entering a community where the values of quiet contemplation, simplicity, and steady patience were woven into the very fabric of daily life. Her name was Maria Mitchell, and though her life would witness great discoveries and span many distant places, her heart would always remain tethered to the calm, enduring beauty of this small island. She would grow to become a seeker of truths, a keeper of books, and a guide to young minds. Yet, her journey was never one of rushing or noise. It was a life built upon the gentle persistence of looking upward, a quiet accumulation of moments spent in shared attention with the natural world. As the evening deepens, we can imagine the comfort of a warm room, where the small details of the past begin to gather softly in our minds. We can visualize the heavy pages of old books turning with a soft rustle, the careful scratch of a pen across thick paper, and the smooth, polished brass of early scientific instruments resting upon a wooden table. Maria's world was one of balance, where the practical tasks of an island household were seamlessly joined with a deep, intellectual curiosity. In the chapters ahead, we will wander through her childhood home, where the lessons of her father opened up the heavens, and we will sit in the quiet sanctuary of the town library, where the hours passed peacefully among rows of leather-bound volumes. We will witness the quiet night when a new wanderer of the skies was discovered, and we will follow her steps across wide oceans to ancient laboratories, and finally to the peaceful courtyards of a college observatory where she passed her wisdom to others. But for now, there is no need to hasten forward, for the story is just beginning, and the stars above are waiting, shining with a steady, tranquil light that has watched over the earth for generations. We may simply breathe in the cool, salt air, listen to the distant murmur of the tide, and let ourselves drift into the history of a life lived in perfect harmony with the night. As the gentle rhythm of the tides continues to cradle the island of Nantucket, we travel back to the first day of August in the year 1818, when Maria Mitchell first opened her eyes to this peaceful world. She was born into a large, bustling Quaker family, where life was structured by the quiet values of simplicity, mutual respect, and an earnest devotion to learning. The house where she grew up was filled with the soft, comforting sounds of daily life, from the gentle creak of wooden floorboards beneath shifting footsteps to the rhythmic hum of a spinning wheel and the warm, low murmurs of children sharing stories by the hearth. Outside the windows, the unique landscape of Nantucket stretched into the evening, defined by rolling sand dunes that held the warmth of the sun long after dusk, and winding paths lined with wild beach plums and sweet bayberry. It was an island community tied deeply to the vast ocean surrounding it, a place where the seasons were measured by the arrival and departure of sailing vessels, and where the daily atmosphere was thick with the scent of salt water, wet hemp ropes, and old wood. For a young girl growing up in this environment, the world felt both small and safely enclosed by the sea, yet infinitely wide whenever she lifted her eyes toward the horizon. The people of Nantucket were largely shaped by the island's whaling economy, a demanding way of life that required great endurance and independent spirit from the families who remained on shore. Because the men of the island were frequently away at sea for months or even years at a time, the women of Nantucket naturally assumed a position of quiet strength, managing households, directing businesses, and maintaining the social fabric of the community, with a calm efficiency. This distinctive independence was further supported by the Quaker faith, which deeply influenced the island's culture. In the simple meeting houses where the community gathered, there were no grand decorations or loud sermons. Instead, the people sat together in a restorative, shared silence, waiting patiently for the inner light of wisdom to guide their thoughts. This faith held a profound belief in the intellectual equality of all individuals, encouraging both boys and girls to pursue a serious education, to read widely, and to develop a deep personal discipline. Within Maria's home, her parents, William and Lydia Mitchell, nurtured this philosophy every single day, creating an environment where curiosity was considered a virtue and academic study was embraced as a form of quiet devotion. When night fell across Nantucket, the island transformed into a sanctuary of deep, velvety darkness, far removed from the bright, noisy cities of the mainland. The harbor bells would chime softly across the water, their low tones drifting through the rising sea mist that gathered in the narrow lanes and wrapped the weathered wooden houses in a protective shroud. In this stillness, the sky above the island revealed itself in magnificent, unobstructed clarity, displaying a dense tapestry of stars that seemed to rest just above the rooftops. For Maria and her siblings, the night sky was not a distant, mysterious void, but a familiar and comforting landscape that they learned to recognize just as easily as the lanes of their hometown. Her father, William, was a man of great patience who possessed a passion for the natural world, and he frequently invited his children to look upward, teaching them to notice the slow, orderly movements of the constellations as they drifted across the celestial sphere. There was no rushing in these lessons, only the steady accumulation of observations made from a high window or a quiet corner of the yard where the only light came from a low lantern and the steady, distant beam of the shore lighthouse. In this atmosphere of gentle discipline and intellectual seriousness, Maria's mind began to take shape, developing a lifelong appreciation for accuracy, patience, and the beauty of small details. She learned to assist with the practical tasks of the household, wrapping herself in a warm wool shawl against the chilly island drafts, tending to the oil lamps, and participating in the daily chores that kept the family comfortable. Yet, her thoughts were always encouraged to wander toward higher things, whether she was listening to her parents discuss literature in the evening or watching her father carefully adjust a mathematical instrument. The island itself served as her first teacher, instructing her in the rhythms of nature through the slow turning of the tides, the changing patterns of the wind, and the predictable return of the stars each season. It was a childhood free from the anxieties of modern haste, built instead upon the reliable and comforting patterns of an old maritime community. As we picture this young girl standing quietly beneath the vast dark Nantucket sky, surrounded by the peaceful murmurs of the ocean and the soft glow of distant lanterns, we can feel the deep, restorative rest that comes from a life aligned with the timeless movements of the universe. The stars continue their patient journey overhead, watching over the sleeping island just as they did so many years ago. The deep, restful silence of the island night deepens even further as we turn our attention toward the quiet bond between a father and his daughter, a connection forged in the soft glow of candlelight and the infinite spaces of the evening sky. William Mitchell was a man of remarkable patience and gentle intellect, working as an island school teacher while dedicating his spare hours to the study of the heavens. He was not a man who sought fame or grand recognition, but rather someone who found a profound sense of peace in the orderly movements of nature, a quality that he passed down naturally to his children. In the modest rooms of their Nantucket home, William created a sanctuary of learning, where scientific inquiry was treated with the same quiet reverence as an evening prayer. Maria, with her observant eyes and steady disposition, found herself drawn to her father's pursuits from a very young age, discovering a comforting sense of predictability in the numbers and charts that filled his study. She would sit quietly by his side, watching the steady movement of his hand as he recorded the positions of the stars, learning without any sense of rush that the universe operated on a grand, harmonious schedule. On an island like Nantucket, surrounded by the vast and unpredictable Atlantic Ocean, the study of the sky was not merely a distant academic pursuit, but a vital part of daily survival. The whaling ships that departed from the harbor for years at a time relied entirely on the stars and the moon to navigate across the trackless waters. making the accurate measurement of time and celestial positions a matter of life and death. Because of this, the island captains frequently brought their delicate maritime instruments to William Mitchell, trusting him to regulate their ship chronometers and verify the precision of their sextants before they set sail. Maria grew up in the presence of these beautiful, polished brass tools, observing how her father handled them with an almost sacred care and a deep respect for accuracy. She learned to look through the lenses, to adjust the fine dials with a gentle touch, and to understand the profound connection between the micro movements of a tiny gear and the macro movements of the stars above. For Maria, mathematics became a beautiful, quiet language that linked the isolated wooden houses of her home to the furthest reaches of the ocean and the sky. As the years drifted by, Maria's role transformed from that of a curious child watching from the shadows to a trusted assistant who worked in perfect synchronization with her father. By the time she was a young girl, she was already learning the complex mathematical formulas required to calculate eclipses and determine longitude, finding a comforting rhythm in the steady accumulation of numbers on thick paper. We can visualize a chilly autumn evening, with the wind whispering softly through the shingles of the roof and a low lantern casting long, warm shadows across the wooden floorboards. Father and daughter would stand together near a high window or out upon the open walkway of the roof, wrapped in heavy woolen blankets to ward off the sea draft, waiting patiently for a specific star to cross the meridian. There was no tension in their waiting, only a shared, meditative focus that made the hours pass with a peaceful fluidity. When the moment arrived, William would call out the time in a hushed voice, and Maria, working by the dim amber light of an oil lamp, would carefully record the numbers, her pen scratching softly against the paper in a rhythmic cadence that mirrored the steady ticking of the chronometer. This shared devotion to the sky created a deep, unspoken bond between William and Maria, an emotional connection that was anchored not in loud expressions of affection, but in mutual respect, shared curiosity, and a quiet discipline. In an era when young women were rarely encouraged to pursue the rigorous paths of mathematics and higher science, William Mitchell treated his daughter's intellect with absolute seriousness, never doubting her capacity for precision or her depth of understanding. He guided her gently, allowing her to make her own observations and to feel the quiet thrill of solving a difficult mathematical problem through her own patience and persistence. This early training instilled in Maria a calm, unshakable confidence in her own mind, a sense of inner peace that arose from knowing how to ground herself in the reliable laws of nature. The hours they spent together beneath the dark canopy of the night were filled with a profound stillness, a space where the busy demands of the daytime world dissolved into insignificance, leaving only the soft hum of the wind, the distant murmur of the tide, and the timeless light of the stars. As this chapter of her youth gently unfolds in our minds, we can feel the deep, restorative rest that comes from witnessing such a balanced and purposeful life. The instruments rest quietly upon the table, their polished surfaces catching the last faint glimmer of the fading lamp, while the pages of calculations sit closed, holding the silent truths of the heavens within their borders. Maria and her father have finished their work for the evening, leaving the sky to continue its slow, majestic rotation without them. The island rests in a deep, undisturbed slumber, wrapped in the cool embrace of the ocean mist and the comforting assurance that the same stars they measured so carefully will return tomorrow, shining with the very same steady, tranquil light. We may let our own thoughts rest now, drifting softly into the quiet space that lies between the earth and the heavens, where everything is orderly, peaceful, and entirely at ease. As the morning light breaks softly over the gray shingles of Nantucket, the island wakes to a different kind of quiet, and the young Maria Mitchell begins a new chapter of her purposeful life. The transition from a student beside her father to a teacher of others unfolds naturally, like the gradual clearing of the morning mist over the harbor. In these early years of her adulthood, Maria steps into the role of a guide for the island's children, opening a modest schoolroom where the atmosphere is defined by calmness and steady encouragement. We can visualize the simple wooden benches worn smooth by many hands, the soft gray slates resting in neat rows, and the fine dust of white chalk settling quietly in the pale beams of early sunlight. There is no harshness in this space, for Maria brings a gentle patience to her students, understanding that the young mind develops best when allowed to discover the world at its own unhurried pace. The daily routine of the schoolroom becomes a soothing rhythm that anchors her days, a predictable melody of scratching pens, turning pages, and the soft murmur of children reciting lessons by the warmth of a small wood stove. Maria moves among the benches with a quiet grace, her wool dress rustling softly against the floorboards as she leans down to help a child correct a column of numbers or trace a map. She teaches them to notice the small details of the world around them, to value accuracy in their thoughts, and to approach their studies with an earnest devotion. In this sanctuary of learning, the simple materials of education take on a comforting familiarity, from the deep blue inkwells to the clean smell of new paper and the smooth texture of the slate pencils. For Maria, these hours spent in the company of young minds are not a burden, but a beautiful extension of her own internal harmony, sharing the steady light of knowledge that had illuminated her own childhood. When the children depart and the schoolroom falls back into its evening stillness, Maria returns to her private world of scholarship, continuing a journey of self-education that knows no boundaries. In an era when the formal doors of higher education are largely closed to women, Maria does not allow these external limitations to disturb the inner peace of her mind. From a reflective distance, the restrictions of the wider world appear like distant storms on the horizon, incapable of shaking the solid foundation she has built within her own heart. She seeks no grand titles or public debates. Instead, she turns her attention inward, finding fulfillment in the quiet mastery of complex mathematical principles and the deep study of advanced astronomy. Wrapped in a warm wool shawl as the twilight deepens, she spends hours with heavy volumes borrowed from local collections, her mind traveling fearlessly through the intricate formulas of celestial mechanics and the elegant logic of the universe. This solitary study is characterized by an unhurried discipline, an accumulation of knowledge that grows slowly and steadily, like the silent rings of an old island tree. Maria trains herself to read the works of great thinkers, patiently working through dense lines of text by the steady glow of an oil lamp. Never discouraged by the difficulty of the task, she finds a profound sense of companionship in these books, realizing that the laws of nature are a universal heritage, accessible to any mind that possesses the patience to look closely and think deeply. Her daily habits of learning become a form of quiet meditation, a space where the passing hours are measured not by the ticking of a clock, but by the gradual clearing of a difficult problem, or the harmonious alignment of a balanced equation. Her confidence grows not from the praise of others, but from the reliable accuracy of her own observations and calculations, an internal strength that keeps her grounded and entirely at ease. As the evening deepens into night and the lamp within her study begins to cast a soft light across her open notebooks, we can feel the profound tranquility that accompanies a life dedicated to the quiet pursuit of truth. The slates and chalk are put away, the schoolroom benches rest in the shadows, and the heavy leather-bound volumes sit quietly upon the desk, their pages holding the patient thoughts of a young woman who has learned to find complete freedom within the boundaries of her own mind. The island outside her window rests beneath its familiar canopy of stars, casting a protective silence over the narrow streets and the dark, calm waters of the harbor. Maria closes her books with a gentle touch, allowing her thoughts to rest after a day of meaningful labor and deep contemplation. The night is vast and peaceful, wrapping the young scholar in a deep, restorative comfort, while overhead, the stars continue their long, majestic journey, shining with the same steady and timeless light that guides her dreams. As the quiet seasons of her young adulthood continue to blend into one another, Maria steps into a new role that will define the next 2 decades of her peaceful existence. In the heart of Nantucket town, the local library, known as the Athenaeum, stands as a beacon of quiet thought, and it is here that Maria becomes the primary librarian. We can imagine the soft opening of the heavy wooden front doors, welcoming the gentle daylight into a hall filled with a comforting aroma of aged paper, leather bindings, and polished oak shelves. This transition into a serene sanctuary fits her gentle disposition perfectly, anchoring her days with the orderly care of books. Inside these tall walls, the hustle of the busy harbor outside fades into a gentle murmur, replaced by a profound and restful stillness. Maria finds herself surrounded by the collective wisdom of generations, moving through this space with a calm familiarity that makes her feel entirely at home. The daily routine within the Athenaeum becomes a beautiful, repetitive melody that brings peace to Maria's life. Throughout the long afternoons, her hours are marked by the soft, rhythmic rustle of pages turning, the occasional gentle squeak of a floorboard, and the slow, steady ticking of a tall clock standing in the corner. She spends her time organizing the growing collection, updating the handwritten catalogs with her precise script, and carefully sliding heavy volumes back onto the high wooden shelves. When a cold autumn rain beats softly against the tall glass window panes, the library transforms into an even deeper refuge, warmed by the amber glow of oil lamps and the gentle crackle of a fire burning in the hearth. Visitors arrive quietly, settling into comfortable chairs to read newspapers or study scientific journals. Maria is always there to guide them with a quiet word, serving as the silent custodian of this intellectual sanctuary, where time seems to slow down to a restful crawl. Though nestled on an isolated island surrounded by the rolling waves of the Atlantic, the Athenaeum serves as a vital bridge connecting Nantucket to the grand intellectual movements of the 19th century. Through the doors of this library pass the latest books, scientific periodicals, and literary essays from distant cities, bringing a wealth of modern thought to the quiet shores. Eminent scholars who visit the island frequently make their way to the Athenaeum, sharing new ideas that enrich the local community without disrupting its peaceful character. For Maria, managing this steady influx of knowledge provides an extraordinary opportunity for continued self-guided study, allowing her mind to travel across continents while her feet remain grounded on the familiar floorboards. She reads widely and deeply, absorbing complex scientific treatises and engaging literature during the quiet intervals when the library is still, expanding her understanding of the universe completely free from the pressures of public praise. As the daylight fades and the last readers softly close their books to return to their homes, the Athenaeum falls into evening shadow. Yet Maria's true day of observation is only just beginning. She steps out from the quiet library into the cool, refreshing night air of the island, carrying the same patient focus from the world of books into the limitless architecture of the star-filled sky. While the town sleeps soundly beneath their blankets, Maria walks up the stairs to the rooftop of her family's home, where her telescope waits patiently beneath the open canopy of the heavens. Her public life as a modest librarian is beautifully balanced by this private, nocturnal devotion, a seamless transition from the recorded thoughts of humanity to the unwritten mysteries of the celestial sphere. She adjusts the brass dials of her instrument with an unhurried precision, her eyes tracking the slow, majestic drift of planets. This nightly practice is not a hurried race for discovery, but rather a peaceful continuation of her daily habits, a slow and meditative accumulation of data recorded carefully by the dim light of her lantern. Years pass in this harmonious rhythm of daytime literacy and nighttime observation, a period of her life that exemplifies the beauty of steady, quiet growth without the anxiety of haste. Maria's knowledge does not arrive in sudden flashes, but grows slowly and reliably, like the quiet gathering of the evening tide along the sandy shores of the island. Each book read, each chart completed, and each hour spent gazing through the lens of her telescope represents a tiny, beautiful stone in the solid foundation of her intellect. She remains entirely content in this quiet corner of the world, finding absolute fulfillment in the mere act of noticing, learning, and recording the timeless truths of nature. The library shelves remain orderly and secure. The stars overhead continue their predictable, comforting dance across the velvety sky, and the deep stillness of Nantucket wraps her in a profound and restorative peace. As we imagine the soft light of her lamp reflecting off the polished brass of her telescope, we can let our own minds rest completely, comforted by the knowledge that some of the greatest journeys are those taken in absolute silence and unhurried grace. We enter the heart of autumn, arriving at the first night of October in the year 1847, a date that would linger softly in the annals of history. Yet it began with the very same tranquil rhythm that defined every other evening on the island of Nantucket. The sun had set hours before, leaving behind a deep velvet sky that stretched beautifully over the dark waters of the harbor, while a cool, crisp breeze swept gently across the sandy dunes and whispered through the narrow, cobbled lanes of the sleeping town. Below the high rooftops, the citizens of the island had long since extinguished their lamps and allowed their fires to die down to glowing embers drifting into a peaceful slumber, while the distant, rhythmic murmur of the tide offered a soothing lullaby to the night. For Maria, this hour was a familiar sanctuary, a time when the busy demands of her daytime role at the library dissolved completely into the shadows, allowing her to step into the cool, refreshing air with a sense of quiet anticipation. She wrapped her heavy woolen shawl tightly around her shoulders, feeling the comforting weight of the fabric against the evening chill as she climbed the wooden stairs toward the open platform on the roof of her family's home, where the quiet mysteries of the universe were waiting to be read. Upon the rooftop, the world felt infinitely wide and beautifully still, with the great canopy of the universe unfolding above her in a magnificent, glittering display of ancient starlight that had traveled through the vastness of space to reach her small corner of the earth. Her telescope stood waiting patiently in the darkness, its polished brass tubes catching the faint silver glints of the stars, while her lantern sat low on the wooden deck, casting a warm, amber glow that barely reached the edges of her open notebooks and charts. Maria approached the instrument with the unhurried grace of long habit, her fingers adjusting the delicate screws and fine leveling dials with a practiced, gentle touch that required no haste or sense of competition. She rested her eye against the lens, entering a silent realm where the familiar constellations drifted slowly into view, each star a reliable and comforting friend she had known since her earliest childhood lessons with her father. Night after night, her practice was one of gentle, sweeping, moving the telescope in slow horizontal paths across the heavens, systematically observing the dark spaces between the known stars, completely content with the quiet rhythm of the search itself, rather than any desperate longing for public fame or discovery. As she guided the lens patiently through the upper reaches of the sky near the familiar form of the North Star, her gaze lingered upon a particular coordinate, where the deep darkness seemed just a fraction different than it had been before. There, nestled quietly among the sharp, bright points of distant starlight, was a faint, hazy smudge of light, a delicate and blurry visitor that possessed no sharp edges and seemed to rest like a tiny, luminous cloud in the vast ocean of space. Anyone else might have passed it over without a second thought or mistaken it for a thin wisp of sea fog drifting high in the island atmosphere. But Maria's mind was deeply inscribed with the exact topography of the night sky, and she knew with absolute certainty that this dim glow did not belong to any recorded star or nebula. There was no outburst of excitement on the quiet rooftop, nor did her heart race with a frantic or urgent energy. Instead, a wave of deep, meditative focus washed over her as she leaned closer to the instrument, her mind turning naturally to the elegant language of mathematics and verification, treating the moment with the same reverent calmness she brought to every hour of her study. With a steady hand, she picked up her pen, its soft scratching sound blending harmoniously with the gentle whisper of the wind as she carefully recorded the precise position of the mysterious object, noting its distance from the surrounding constellations with absolute exactness. She understood that a true discovery required patience above all else, for a single observation could not reveal the true nature of a celestial wanderer. And so she resolved to wait for the turning of the earth to provide the necessary proof. She watched the faint smudge for hours, tracking its place in the lens, until the first pale lines of dawn began to soften the eastern horizon and mask the stars in a blanket of morning blue, forcing her to close her notebook and return to the waking world below. The next evening brought a welcome clarity back to the Nantucket sky, and Maria returned to her post on the roof, her telescope tracking directly back to the exact coordinates she had marked the night before. With a quiet sense of satisfaction, she observed that the hazy form had shifted its position slightly against the background stars, a slow and deliberate movement that confirmed it was not a distant nebula, but a new, undiscovered comet traveling on its own majestic path through the solar system. This quiet evening on the rooftop would gradually ripple outward across the wide oceans, carrying her name to distant academies and royal courts, where the celestial traveler would eventually become known to history as Miss Mitchell's Comet. Yet for Maria, the true essence of that night did not lie in the international recognition or the gold medals that would later arrive from foreign kings, but in a serene moment of connection between a patient observer and the beautiful hidden order of the universe. The discovery was a gentle turning point in her life, a soft unfolding of a wider destiny that left her inner peace entirely undisturbed. As she continued to view her scientific work as a modest form of devotion and quiet attention, as we contemplate this peaceful image of Maria standing beneath the vast autumn sky, her lantern casting a soft golden glow over her completed charts, while the new comet drifts silently through the deep architecture of the cosmos, we can feel a profound sense of rest settling over our own thoughts. The telescope rests quietly now, its brass components cooling in the night air, while the stars and their faint, mysterious visitors continue their slow, majestic dance above the sleeping island, wrapping the world in a deep, restorative, and everlasting tranquility. The news of the rooftop discovery does not burst upon the world with a loud clamor, but rather travels across the wide expanse of the Atlantic Ocean with the slow and steady pace of the sailing ships that carry the winter mail. In the months that follow that clear October night, the quiet routines of the Nantucket Athenaeum remain beautifully undisturbed, while far away in the grand capitals of Europe, astronomers and scholars exchange long, handwritten letters discussing the young woman who read the heavens so accurately from her island home. Heavy leather mail sacks are lifted from the holds of packets, carrying official notices and wax-sealed envelopes that slowly find their way through the salty air of the harbor to the Mitchell household. For Maria, these letters from distant lands arrive like quiet echoes from another world read by the soft glow of her evening lamp. Yet they do not alter the calm baseline of her days or shake her deep commitment to the simple values of her community. Among these long-traveled communications comes word from Denmark, where King Christian VIII had established a special gold medal to honor those who discovered comets invisible to the unassisted eye. Though the king passes away before the medal can be personally delivered, his royal promise is honored, and a beautifully crafted gold coin eventually arrives on the isolated shores of Nantucket, its polished surface reflecting the faint light of the family sitting room. The medal is adorned with an image of the classical muse of astronomy and bears a Latin inscription celebrating her patient observation, yet Maria does not display it with pride or seek the admiration of her neighbors. Instead, the precious object is wrapped in a soft cloth and placed gently in a quiet drawer, treated not as a trophy of personal triumph, but as a lovely token of a shared human fascination with the stars. She returns to her telescope that very evening, knowing that the true reward of her labor lies not in the solid weight of gold, but in the beautiful order of the celestial wanderers she tracks through the glass. The ripples of recognition continue to expand softly across the American mainland, and in the year 1848, the members of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences gather in Boston to vote Maria into their historic ranks. She becomes the first woman ever elected to this prestigious scientific body, her name inscribed in neat ink alongside the most celebrated minds of the era within the heavy, leather-bound ledgers of the institution. Official certificates of membership, printed on thick parchment and stamped with official wax seals, are delivered to her library desk, offering a formal acknowledgement of her place in the wider intellectual community. This honor is accepted with the same quiet dignity and restraint that characterizes her Quaker heritage, for she understands that her true standing in the universe is determined by the precision of her mathematics rather than the titles bestowed by society. The members of the Academy recognize a peer whose dedication to truth matches their own, and though she remains physically bound to her island, her intellect is now openly welcomed into the grand conversations of the age. Soon after, a new opportunity unfolds that allows her to turn her mathematical talents into a regular, purposeful occupation, as she is appointed to work as a computer for the newly established American Ephemeris and Nautical Almanac. Her specific assignment is to calculate the precise path of the planet Venus, tracking its complex movements through the sky, so that sailors can rely on these numbers to navigate the trackless oceans safely. Every single day, her desk is covered with massive sheets of grid paper, where columns of numbers are compiled with a rhythmic, meditative focus that perfectly suits her love for order and accuracy. Her pen moves steadily across the pages for hours at a time, performing intricate calculations of planetary orbits, transforming the movements of the evening sky into a reliable guide for maritime travelers. This work brings a deep sense of satisfaction to Maria, for it bridges her love for the heavens with the practical needs of the seafaring community she has known all her life. turning her solitary observations into a lasting contribution to human safety and knowledge. Despite the growing collection of official honors and the steady arrival of visitors who wish to meet the famous woman astronomer of Nantucket, Maria remains entirely unchanged in her daily habits and personal modesty. She continues to walk the narrow cobblestone streets to the Athenaeum each morning, her simple wool dress rustling softly against the stones as she greets her neighbors with the same familiar warmth she has always shown. The public recognition is viewed from a peaceful, reflective distance, treated as a pleasant but fleeting breeze that passes over the solid architecture of her inner life without causing any disruption. Her primary devotion remains anchored in the quiet acts of reading, calculating, and looking upward, finding her greatest happiness in the predictable return of the constellations each night. As the harbor lamps begin to twinkle in the darkening twilight and the island wraps itself once more in its blanket of sea mist, she closes her ledgers with a gentle touch and prepares her mind for the true sanctuary of the open sky. As Maria's quiet life on Nantucket slowly begins to evolve following her international success, her unshakable inner stillness and simplicity remain beautifully intact, allowing her to protect the modesty of her scientific soul, no matter how large the world around her grows. Her fame, which has now crossed the boundaries of the isolated island, invites her to travel on long, unhurried journeys to the grand cities of the American mainland and across the vast ocean to the ancient lands of Europe. Yet, these travels are never a pursuit of adventure or public display, but rather a peaceful door opening to witness the order of the universe from entirely new perspectives. Boarding the great sailing vessels for the long crossing, she drifts into a restful sleep in her wooden cabin, to the rhythmic, comforting sound of waves lapping against the hull, her mind still filled with the familiar, tranquil shores of Nantucket, the whispers of the sand dunes, and the quiet observation nights spent beside her father. This slow progression across the infinite waters provides her with a wide and deeply restorative space of time to think without haste, to study her old data journals, and to watch the changing face of the night sky from entirely new latitudes. When she arrives at the great scientific centers of America and Europe, the magnificent libraries, massive telescopes, and the most brilliant minds of the era greet her with profound respect, deeply moved by her immense knowledge and humble demeanor. While she moves through this brilliant new world without losing a single piece of her true identity, walking through the stone corridors of historic observatories, the faint echoes of her footsteps beneath the high-arched ceilings remind her of how deeply rooted and timeless human knowledge truly is, and she studies the delicate brass instruments, intricate celestial maps, and centuries-old manuscripts with a quiet, focused attention. Famous astronomers and philosophers gather with her in quiet library rooms, speaking in low tones beneath the soft glow of candlelight about the orbits of planets and the mysterious paths of comets. Yet, Maria always chooses her words with her signature, calm, dressed in her simple Quaker attire, making it clear that she seeks no ambition or praise, but only the pure truth of nature. These meetings are never an exhibition of titles or names for her, but a beautiful sharing of humanity's ancient curiosity regarding the heavens, allowing her to remain an islander at heart and maintain her sacred inner silence among the grandest names of science. Throughout her travels, sarmalanen by not only the wonders of the sky, but also the quiet beauties of the earth, Maria loves to visit old peaceful gardens in every city she touches, watching the gentle operations of nature and finding true comfort in the restful lines of poetry. Walking beneath the shade of ancient trees in the misty mornings of London or the calm twilights of Paris, the pale sunlight filtering through the leaves gently washes away her fatigue, and she realizes with deep peace that nature exists with the same magnificent silence everywhere, even in the heart of the busiest cities. Her love for literature and philosophy wraps her scientific mind like a soft protective blanket, for she knows instinctively that there is an invisible, elegant bond between the mathematics of the stars and the verses of a poem, both being distinct expressions of the very same universal harmony. The low-voiced, deep conversations she shares with kind spirits over a warm cup of tea while watching the rain fall softly against the window pane serve as healing pauses that erase the haste of the day, completely resting the mind and preparing the soul for the next night of observation. Watching the foreign landscapes, green valleys, and misty mountains roll past her train window with great patience, This slow transition of time and space deepens the clear horizon of her inner world, allowing her to appreciate how vast and full of hidden beauties the Earth truly is. Yet, this expanding world never shadows the foundational values, simplicity, and habit of deep attention she learned on Nantucket. Instead, each new experience reinforces her strong character and makes her an even more humble observer before the cosmos. Writing letters to her family in the evenings by the flickering warm light of a single candle in quiet rooms, the familiar and rhythmic scratch of her pen across the paper recreates the warmth of her home, the salty island breeze, and the peaceful aroma of the Athenum shelves. In every line she writes, she expresses with gentle affection that despite all the grandeur she has witnessed, her heart remains firmly tethered to that small island, the old rooftop walkway, and the polished brass telescope where she first learned to read the heavens. As this long and restorative period of travel gently draws to a close, Maria Mitchell returns to her beloved Nantucket shores with an immense treasury of knowledge in her mind, but without a single trace of pride in her soul. Wrapped once more in the protective, affectionate silence of the island, she is no longer just the librarian of a small town, but a world-renowned and respected scientist. Yet when night falls and she climbs the stairs to the old rooftop to step behind her telescope, she retains the absolute purity of the curious young girl simply trying to understand the sky. The very same stars that shone over all the foreign countries and grand cities she visited now look down upon this familiar island and calm sea with the exact same unyielding, comforting light, bringing her eye closer to the lens to look into the infinite depths. The fatigue of the day and of past journeys dissolves entirely into a flawless stillness, leaving her completely at ease within the magnificent, unhurried order of the universe. As we visualize her calm and expanding world in our minds, we can feel the noises of the outside world fading away, wrapped in the protective darkness of the night, leaving ourselves to the timeless, restorative guidance of the stars as we drift into a deep and peaceful sleep. By the time the year 1865 arrives, a serene yet profoundly meaningful new chapter opens in Maria Mitchell's life, as she is invited to become one of the first professors and the director of the Astronomical Observatory at Vassar College in peaceful Poughkeepsie, New York. This era was a time when higher scientific education for young women was still entirely new, unconventional, and met with great public astonishment. However, Maria embraces this monumental shift without a hint of tension or social conflict, welcoming it with her characteristic quiet dignity and unshakable moral clarity. Built specifically for her on the college's wide green campus, the observatory serves not merely as a workspace, but as both her new home alongside her elderly father and a grand temple of knowledge where young minds gather to meet the night sky. As soft daylight streams through the wooden shuttered windows, illuminating the polished floors and detailed astronomical charts on the walls, Maria brings with her the very same Nantucket simplicity, humility, and inner stillness that had guided her whole life. Within the high-ceilinged rooms of the observatory, the calm spirit of her home island is beautifully reborn. Books are arranged unhurriedly along the shelves, delicate brass instruments are placed upon tables with absolute care, and the entire structure waits peacefully for the deep restorative silence of the night and the awakening of the stars. The Vassar Observatory, with its distinctive architecture and magnificent telescope, forms a tranquil world entirely of its own, becoming a daily sanctuary carefully walked by Maria and her students, rising beneath the dome like a giant eye waiting to unlock the gates of the universe. The central telescope, the third largest in the country, at the time stands as a breathtaking harmony of engineering and classical elegance. Its smooth brass gears and heavy frame meticulously crafted for absolute precision. In the late afternoons, as the sun sets slowly, behind the campus's ancient trees casting long amber shadows across the grass, the air inside the dome room begins to cool, and the heavy wooden steps leading to the observation deck quietly welcome their evening visitors. Maria moves to operate the mechanical weights that open the great slit of the dome, sliding the wooden shutters apart with a steady, unhurried motion that allows the cool, fresh evening air to wash into the room, bringing the first twinkling stars of dusk directly into view. Every detail within the sacred space, from the low rhythmic hum of the rotating dome to the faint silver glint of starlight reflecting off the metal tube, builds a soothing soundscape that stills the mind and invites a profound sense of peace before the vastness of the cosmos. Maria's educational philosophy is built upon a beautifully elegant method, completely removed from the rigid structures of rote memorization, encouraging her students to observe directly, question fearlessly, and rely entirely on the strength of their own minds. She does not wish for these young women to merely memorize star charts drawn by others. Instead, she guides them to step directly behind the telescope lens to work through complex mathematical variables with their own hands, and to read the language of the cosmos with their own eyes. The hours spent in her classroom pass with great intellectual seriousness, but without a shred of haste or academic pressure, flowing naturally like a timeless, comfortable conversation through which students descend softly into the deep truths of science, wrapped tightly in their heavy wool shawls against the nocturnal drafts. The young women sit upon the steps of the observatory. The silence of the room, broken only by the soft rustle of pages and the rhythmic, comforting scratch of graphite pencils recording data on their slates. These simple tools, inkwells, smooth paper, and fine brass rulers, become sacred companions in their hands, unlocking the grand architecture of the universe, while Maria walks among them, not as a rigid lecturer, but as a wise peer and grounding guide on a shared journey of quiet devotion. Nights at the observatory become exceptionally peaceful and enchanting, once the lights of the distant campus dormitories are extinguished and the rest of the world falls into a deep, undisturbed slumber. Shielded by the protective cloak of darkness, Maria and her students spend long hours at their stations, where the slow, deliberate passage of time brings an unmatched tranquility to the mind. Watching the majestic, slow orbit of the planets, the pale, misty glow of distant nebulae, and the elegant, gravitational dance of binary stars becomes far more than an academic exercise. It transforms into a deeply restorative form of silent meditation, working by the soul-warm amber light of a low-oil lamp. The surrounding shadows make the brilliance of the heavens appear even more magnificent, dissolving all daily anxieties and worldly worries into complete insignificance. The patient, waiting for clouds to clear from the meridian, the quiet determination of the wind's direction, and the shared focus of catching a star, crossing the fine wires of the reticle weave, an invisible lasting bond among the observers, anchoring them firmly to one another and to the timeless rhythm of the cosmos. These shared night vigils and hours of mathematical labor do not just create an educational program beneath Vassar's domed roof, they construct a tightly knit, fiercely independent, and quietly dignified community of women scholars. The heavy social barriers of the 19th century and the prevailing doubts regarding women's intellectual capabilities are never permitted to cross the threshold of this observatory, leaving Maria's students entirely free to grow in a space of absolute safety and mutual respect. The confidence they build here does not manifest in loud assertions or public debates, but grows steadily and unshakably through meticulous, silent calculations, carefully maintained journals, and a deep reverence for the unyielding laws of nature. In this most fruitful period of her life, as Maria Mitchell transmits the light of the stars to a new generation, she finds herself living in perfect alignment with her true purpose, surrounded by the calm simplicity she has always loved. As dawn approaches, painting the eastern horizon in pale streaks of blue, the telescopes are gently closed, the instruments are covered, and the observatory slips into a well-earned peaceful rest, leaving behind the enduring dignity of knowledge and the timeless guidance of the night sky. The journey of learning beneath the Vassar dome is never one of rigid mandates or cold, abstract memorization, but a gentle invitation to step directly into companionship with the natural world. Maria Mitchell holds a profound and unshakable conviction that the grand architecture of the heavens cannot be truly understood through the ink of a textbook or the secondary accounts of others. It must be witnessed firsthand, felt in the cool night air, and traced with one's own eyes through the clear glass of a lens. As the evening shadows stretch across the college grounds and the bustling activities of the daytime campus slowly fade into a restful quiet, Maria gathers her students, not in a formal lecture hall but within the sacred, shadow-draped spaces of the observatory. Here, the atmosphere is defined by an unhurried curiosity and a deep, mutual respect, where the traditional boundaries between teacher and pupil dissolve into a shared sense of wonder. She invites these young women to leave behind the anxieties of performance and public expectation, guiding them instead toward a patient, meditative study of the universe, that strengthens their intellect while bringing a profound sense of peace to their souls. We can visualize the soft, enchanting scene inside the dome room as a student takes her place at the primary seat of the great telescope, her hands adjusting the smooth brass dials under Maria's gentle, encouraging gaze. The room is wrapped in a velvety darkness, illuminated only by the faint amber glow of a single oil lamp that leaves the high rafters in soft shadow and allows the incoming starlight to remain perfectly clear. There is a breathless, magical moment of silence as the young woman aligns her eye with the lens, and a quiet murmur of pure revelation escapes her lips as the sharp, magnificent details of the cosmos burst into view. For the first time, she sees the jagged, silver craters of the moon casting long shadows across ancient lunar plains, or the delicate golden rings of Saturn suspended weightlessly in the deep ocean of space. Maria stands quietly by her side, a serene smile gracing her features, completely content to step into the background so that her students may experience the unmediated thrill of discovery for themselves. She understands that this direct contact with the reality of nature changes a mind forever, instilling a deep internal confidence that no amount of theoretical lecturing could ever replicate. This unique method of teaching is anchored by a beautiful, unhurried patience, instructing the young women in the vital scientific art of waiting and noticing the smallest details. In Maria's observatory, a cloudy evening is never viewed as a disappointment or a wasted hour, but rather as an opportunity to cultivate the steady discipline required of a true scholar. The students learn to sit quietly together in the dim quarters, listening to the rhythmic, comforting ticking of the astronomical chronometer and the soft whisper of the night wind against the exterior walls. They learn that the sky does not reveal its secrets to the rushed or the impatient, but rewards those who possess the grace to wait for the heavy mists to part and the atmosphere to settle into absolute clarity. When the dark clouds finally drift away, revealing a pristine tapestry of stars, the reward is felt deeply by all, transforming the act of scientific observation into a shared meditative ritual that aligns their internal rhythms with the majestic, orderly movements of the universe. Beyond the rigorous hours of mathematical calculation and nocturnal tracking, the observatory under Maria's care becomes a warm, vibrant home filled with laughter, poetry, and domestic comfort. She introduces the delightful tradition of dome parties, where the solemn spaces of science are seamlessly blended with the simple joys of community life. On these special evenings, the smell of fresh wood smoke and brewing tea fills the rooms, and the students gather around the tables to write light-hearted poems about their astronomical pursuits, their verses scratching softly onto paper by the warm light of the hearth. Maria participates with a joyful, relaxed spirit, showing her pupils that a life dedicated to the highest echelons of science does not require the sacrifice of human warmth, creativity, or simple happiness. In this sanctuary, the heavy demands of the outside world are completely barred, creating a safe and nurturing ecosystem where young women can intellectualize freely, bond deeply, and discover the true shape of their own independent identities. As the midnight hour passes, and the long, fulfilling night of observation draws to a close, the students reluctantly put away their notebooks and wrap their wool cloaks tightly around their shoulders to return to their dormitories. They walk across the dew-kissed grass of the sleeping campus in small, quiet groups, looking up at the sky with a new and lasting reverence, their hearts carrying the luminous truths they witnessed through the glass. Maria remains in the quiet observatory for a few final moments, checking the locks on the heavy cases and ensuring that the great telescope rests securely beneath its dark dome. The silence that settles over the building is profound and restorative, a peaceful container for a day spent in the beautiful service of truth and enlightenment. As we picture the fading embers of the fire and the steady, eternal shine of the stars above the college, we can let our own minds rest, completely sinking into the deep, untroubled comfort of a universe that is perfectly ordered, infinitely patient, and entirely at peace. As the long, fruitful decades of her teaching at Vassar College gently blend into the evening of her life, the year 1888 brings a natural time of transition for Maria Mitchell. After 23 years of guiding young minds beneath the Great Dome, she decides it is time to step back from her official duties, passing the heavy brass keys of the observatory to the capable hands of the students she had raised into brilliant scholars. There is no sadness or regret in this parting, but rather the quiet satisfaction of a traveler who has completed a long, meaningful journey and now looks forward to the restorative comfort of home. The college community gathers to honor her with deep reverence, expressing their gratitude not with loud celebrations, but with the soft, heartfelt words of a family bidding farewell to a beloved matriarch. Maria accepts their tokens of affection with her signature humility, wrapped in her simple wool shawl, her mind completely at peace as she prepares to enter a more reflective sanctuary. She leaves behind the living legacy in the hearts of dozens of independent women astronomers who would continue to map the heavens long after her voice fell silent, ensuring that the light of knowledge she kindled would never be extinguished. Maria retires to the peaceful town of Lynn, Massachusetts, where her family has established a quiet residence far removed from the public demands of academic life. Here, in the spacious backyard of her new home, her dedicated family builds a small, private wooden observatory, creating a beautiful and intimate space where she can continue her lifelong devotion to the night sky. This modest structure becomes her personal haven, a place where the hectic rhythms of the modernizing world fade into utter insignificance. Inside, her familiar brass telescope waits patiently on its sturdy tripod, its polished metal tubes catching the soft golden beams of her evening lantern just as it did during her childhood on Nantucket. Surrounded by her well-worn notebooks, her reliable charts, and the heavy leather-bound volumes she had collected over a lifetime, Maria finds herself returning to the pure, solitary relationship with the cosmos that had first captured her young heart. The daily routine of her retirement is slow and unhurried, defined by the simple pleasure of watching the sunset behind the trees and waiting for the first stars of evening to signal the start of her nightly watch. In this gentle twilight of her life, her hours are spent in deep, comforting contemplation, looking back over a tapestry of memories woven from starlight, sea mist, and the quiet companionship of books. She finds great joy in the simple, domestic rhythms of her days, reading her favorite poetry by the warmth of the fireplace, writing long, affectionate letters to her former students, and enjoying the tranquil company of her family. The public honors, the royal gold medals, and the historic elections to famous academies are viewed from a peaceful distance, treated as lovely distant milestones that belong to the past, while her present moment is entirely anchored in the serene appreciation of the natural world. She looks upon her life not as a race for individual achievement, but as a modest, steady accumulation of attention paid to the magnificent order of creation. Her daily habits remains a form of quiet meditation, a beautiful expression of a soul that has found complete fulfillment and internal harmony within the reliable, unchanging laws of the universe. As the month of June arrives in the year 1889, bringing a soft, fragrant warmth to the Massachusetts coast, Maria's physical journey draws gently toward its natural conclusion. On the 29th day of the month, as the summer twilight deepens into a rich velvety dark and the stars begin to claim their familiar positions across the vast celestial architecture, she passes away, peacefully, slipping from life as quietly as a setting planet dips beneath the distant horizon. There is no pain, no struggle, and no fear in this final transition. It is a beautiful, seamless blending of her mortal spirit into the grand, everlasting cosmos she had spent her entire existence mapping and admiring. The island of Nantucket, the courtyards of Vassar, and the wider scientific world mourn her passing with a deep, respectful silence, recognizing that a truly unique and noble light has left the earthly plane. Yet the sorrow of her absence is immediately softened by the comforting knowledge that her life was a magnificent triumph of quiet persistence, precision, and love, a perfect example of a human life lived in absolute harmony with the universe. Though her physical form rests quietly beneath the soil of her beloved home, Maria Mitchell's true presence remains beautifully alive, preserved forever in the timeless legacy of human discovery and the enduring beauty of the night. Far away in the silent silver landscapes of the heavens, a prominent crater on the surface of the moon is given her name, a lasting celestial monument that catches the light of the sun for eternity. On the island of Nantucket, her birthplace and the small rooftop observatory are preserved as a sacred sanctuary of learning, inspiring future generations of dreamers to lift their eyes toward the heavens and find their own paths among the stars. But her greatest and most living monument remains the unshakable truth that she opened the doors of the universe for women, proving with absolute clarity that the capacity for precision intellect and profound scientific discovery belongs equally to all human souls. She remains a guiding light, a steady and comforting beacon that continues to shine across the centuries, reminding us that the greatest truths are found not through rushing or noise, but through the patient, quiet cultivation of our own minds. As we bring this multi-part bedtime biography to its final, peaceful resting place, we can feel a deep, restorative stillness settling over our own thoughts, wrapping our minds in a protective blanket of absolute calm. The story of Maria Mitchell is now complete, its beautiful chapters safely closed and resting quietly on the shelves of our memory, leaving behind a profound sense of security and ease. The great telescope at Vassar is secured beneath its dark dome. The old library doors at the Athenaeum are locked for the night, and the small wooden observatory in Lynn rests silently beneath the vast, dark canopy of the sky. The very same stars that Maria tracked so carefully, the North Star, the constellations of her youth, and the distant, mysterious comets continue their slow, majestic, and orderly rotation above us, watching over our sleep with a steady and timeless light. We may now let go of the day completely, releasing all our lingering thoughts and anxieties into the quiet care of the night. We can breathe in the cool, refreshing air, listen to the silent rhythm of the universe, and allow ourselves to drift safely into a deep, untroubled, and everlasting slumber beneath the patient gaze of the heavens.